everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 Quick Match gameplay. This time around we are on MP Crossroads playing as the Wood Elves against the forces of Brettonia. This is one of those matchups that's very badly skewed against the Wood Elves. Wood Elves are a faction that, due to the way they're kind of min-maxed to fight in a certain manner and to be a sort of glass cannon, mobile, shoot and scoot faction, Wood Elves have a few matchups in which they're rather weak. Of course, High Elves, Dwarves are the classics, but Brettonia is the third one against which they struggle because, of course, they don't have too many good counters against heavy cavalry or against getting swamped with units that have really solid shields, which is, of course, something Brettonia has in large quantity. So, going into this matchup, I wanted to sort of try something a little bit new. Normally when I go against Brettonia, I usually try to win the front line fight because Wood Elves do generally have better infantry, so you can win the front of fight and then sort of deal with the cavalry and shunt the cavalry off, try to fight the cavalry off as best I can before finally dealing with them towards the end. What I decided to do here is sort of focus on dealing with the cavalry, stall the infantry, and then deal with the infantry later. So for my lord, I decided to bring the Glady. I think almost a mandatory pick perhaps in this matchup. She does have, we did bring her on an eagle, nothing fancy on, no dragon or anything like that. We do have Arrow of Kurnus as well as Prayer of Anathrema, so what a spell to whittle down and make cav, snipe away at perhaps lords if my opponent decided to bring Lewin, which is not likely and it isn't the case here, but you never know. Spellslinger of Life alongside her. We actually have two Spellslingers here, not just one, but the Spellslinger of Life is in the Aerial Goon Squad. She's on an Eagle, she's got Flesh to Stone, Earthblood, Power of Stone, as well as an Opal Amulet for self-protection, because she is definitely going to be in the meat grinder slugging it out. And she actually has respectable melee stats, all things considered, when she's on an Eagle. Alongside them, though, fleshing out this Goon Squad are these two units of Hawk Riders. So, I'm sure they're not the most common sight. There's something you don't see all that often, but they're actually... If there's a glass cannon unit, if Wood Elves are a glass cannon faction, and they were to have an extra glass cannon unit, the Hawk Riders are it. Relatively low model count at only 18 models, very low survivability between their very bad HP, their low melee defense, and all that sort of stuff. They're definitely not going to be winning any beauty contests as far as staying alive goes. They have a really solid charge bonus and really solid weapon strength with AP. So my plan here was essentially that if my opponent went heavy on cav, we'd actually absorb the charge with the Wild Riders, which is why I fleshed stone, and then rear charge them with Hawk Riders, because Hawk Riders are that monstrous AP, and then with two units of them, it's essentially almost a full unit of cavalry. It's essentially like a unit of cold ones smashing into your back. And with that, I figured, you know, we could probably break most lower-end Brettonian calves, maybe even do a lot of damage to Grail Knights, Grail Guardians, that sort of stuff. So for the absorption force, we do have two units of Wild Riders Shields, one of which is the Wild Hunters of Kurnus, because I wanted the best stats possible. A Sisters of the Thorn in the back. These guys are a little risky because in most matchups they can kind of trade tit for tat in melee if it comes to it, but against Brettonia, who has a lot of magic damage on their cav, this can be an issue. But I still did want those debuffs, and the core of this build here is just having a lot of spells, a lot of control that way. So we've got Shield of Thorns, we've got Curse of Honor, both very useful. Over here, of course, the Eternal Guard could get buffed by that. We could keep him in the fight. And Spellslinger of Beasts with Amber Spear as well as Flock of Doom, because you definitely need something to control some mobs. And I figured, you know, Amber Spear could be a good way once again to whittle down enemy cavalry. Now for my opponents, he went with an incredibly wide, dense build of centered on infantry, but with a very solid Knight core. Now, certainly the Knights Errant and the Defenders of the Lee aren't going to be beating Wild Riders anytime soon. But still, they're no pushovers. They're still a heavy cavalry unit that can smash into my troops from the rear, really get some meaty damage that way. So definitely not to be underestimated. And this unit of Grail Guardians here is going to be an absolute nightmare, because with 120 armor, 56 melee defense, you know, the works. These guys are just an absolute menace on the battlefield. Definitely not something Wood Elves do well against. I'm a little surprised there isn't more Knight power, so definitely a little fortunate perhaps for that. But at the same time, my build isn't really optimized to deal with infantry. It's more optimized to deal with 4, 5, 6 cavalry units than it is to fight against 3 in a mob of infantry. So for the infantry mob, my opponent did go with the Fey Enchantress, of course, to back them up. She's got Earthblood. She's got, and Earthblood makes sense. In both cases, it's important to keep in mind, neither of us really brought great single model units, except for the Grail Guardians perhaps, so something like Regrowth isn't really great for either of us. But she does have Earthblood, she does have Shield of Thorns to boost up non-AP damage and protect against missiles, and Awakening of the Wood to apply slow. Also Favor of the Fae, Bombardment, and Arcane Conduit, as well as, of course, the mandatory Mist of the Lady. In the front, there's some peasants. Front line, or the effective front line, is a bunch of Spearmen at Arms with shields and Men at Arms with shields, of course, to provide those silver shield protection. 3 units of Peasant Bows with Fire Arrows. Once again, a very solid choice here. Wood Elves, of course, have very low armor. And these guys can actually go relatively tit for tat, especially when you consider cost in the process. These guys will do a lot of damage to Wood Elf Archers. In the back, we do have Beast Slayers with Bastone, as well as multiple units of Men at Arms with Polearms. Perhaps my opponent was anticipating some very heavy tree presence. I'm not sure if that's that common. I honestly don't play this match that often to have an idea of what precise meta is supposed to be, but I suppose it can make sense. It's just that, and if you can zone out enemy shooting with your shields, they can probably do okay. I think this is the one questionable unit here. It's definitely the beast, the men-at-arms with polearms. I'd probably consider dropping them in favor of more cavalry. I'd probably get a unit of Grail Knights, but regardless, definitely a cool or interesting choice. 3 units of battle pilgrims behind that, so these guys will of course mulch through my eternal guard. Now, fortunately, here the Glady is going to waste a bullet, or waste an arrow there on the men-at-arms, and I'm going to try to get an Amber Spear here, thinking, you know, it's going to punch through these guys like a knife through butter, and we're going to get into the Knights. But as you can see, the rocket is off, and as the missile goes, it's actually going to peter out and explode here among the peasant bows with fire. So certainly a huge amount of kills. If we look, we've got 53 kills in the Spellslinger, so it's not like we didn't get any value. But it wasn't the value I wanted. I wanted to wipe out these unit of Grail Guardians, and instead the missile went through the basically everything else, and it took out a lot of models, but not the models I wanted. And honestly, it was still a very valuable kill here because we got Men-at-Arms, Beast Slayers, Men-at-Arms, Polearms, a bit of these archers, so a lot of kills, but just not those kills that we wanted. But regardless, we are chipping my opponent down here. Glady does fire a few arrows here into the Grail Guardians, not really doing much. Potentially getting blocked by their shields, it looks like. It looks like their shields. I guess her missiles can actually be blocked by shields. That's pretty crazy. But my sisters are going to sort of scoot off over here, and now I'm pulling forward my air contingent, trying to flank my opponent, and realizing, well, we're going to have to fight somewhere. I need to try to bait the cav out, because the thing is, if I start committing my Wild Riders here, there's a good chance the cavalry will countercharge me, these guys will come in, and we'll be in a bit of a pickle. So I'm trying to get sort of an engagement somewhere where I can really work down the cav. You can see here, Arrow of Kurnus does go down, picking off 3 more models of the Grail Guardians. Nothing too fancy. Arrow of Kurnus, it's kind of a disappointing spell. I feel like it rarely actually delivers all that much. I feel like it should be a bit stronger, but again, most magic missiles are a bit weak, so who am I to say? But we are going to scoot off here, falling back, and trying to buy ourselves some time, trying to string my opponent out, because he's using these archers to pick at us, but I'm figuring that if we can sort of string him out, we can get some value. My opponent here, though, is cavalry out of position. We're going to shoot the gap here with the Sisters of Thorn, just diving through. Now, granted, my opponent's Grail Guardians are right here. They're going to try to intercept, but we are going to actually, this is a bit of an intense micro situation. We're going to pull away. You can see my Wild Riders over here pushing into the flank. The Sisters running like heck, trying to escape from these Grail Guardians, as we're going after this very isolated unit of peasant bows. And as you can see, in come the Hawk Riders, in comes the Glady, and all these troops are diving in here against the peasant bows and fire arrows, and they are going to rout almost immediately. My opponent trying to use the Awakening of the Wood there, slow us down. The problem is the slow isn't that long lasting, honestly. It's going to last a few seconds here, but nowhere near enough to keep us on the ground, and we are shortly going to be able to just bail out and scoot from this place. Elsewhere, in the meantime, you can see the frontline fight going down, the Wild Riders diving in, doing quite a bit of damage, and we do drop a Flock of Doom, which is melting these troops, doing quite a bit of hurt in the process. And so we're softening these guys up as we finally do commit to Eternal Guard into the fray. And these early engagements definitely very important for me, definitely a bit of a winning situation. We're able to slow these Grail Guardians down with our Poison Javelins, start escaping, extricating our sisters. So that's very valuable. You can see they've already lost 5 models, and that's good. It's good to chip these monstrous units down. When I say monstrous, obviously not monstrous in the monstrous infantry sense, but monstrous to kill. Over here, these Knights Errant definitely kind of done a goof. They get hit by an Earthblood, but we are going to pile into them with the Wild Hunters. And one of the things people often, I think, underestimate about Wild Riders is just how much damage they can actually do on the charge. They've got 14 AP with Frenzy active. And these guys only have 80 armor, so honestly, when these guys get into the fight, they're going to mulch through Knights Errant with their fairly miserable melee defense and all that. Definitely, Wild Riders are nowhere near as bad, I think, as some people assume they are in a straight-up cavalry fight. It's just that they don't trade particularly cost-effectively because of their low armor, as much like a lot of Borbol units. Now, as you can see here, we are going to dive into the back. You can see Comet kind of hitting these Eternal Guard rather well, but we're going to get immediate charge here. And in come the Eagles, in come the Hawks, I guess, and the Eagles. Diving into the back of these defenders with the Lay, I drop a Curse of Honor for my sisters. Favor of the Fae completely going to waste here because these guys immediately rout. And that is going to leave my opponent's Fae Enchantress very isolated. And you can see what we've kind of achieved here is very, very important. We've managed to force off the defenders. We've managed to force off the Knights Errant. Really just driving them away. Now, certainly we're being barraged by these peasant bows. There's still a unit of peasant bows here, a unit of peasant bows over here. But we've managed to essentially isolate the Fae Enchantress, so there was no way for these guys to get immune psychology. We're going to hit this Fae Enchantress here with a Prey of Anathrema. Her melee attack is terrible. I'm not entirely sure. Oh, it's because of the Curse of Honor here. But we're actually going to start mauling her here with our caster. You can see we're doing quite a lot of work. She's really not having a good time. She's not able to scoot and get out of the way, which is really what she needs to be doing right now. She just cast an Earthblood, but really just it's not going to help. You can see Awakening of the Wood. She of course does have quite a bit of survivability or abilities to sort of do damage, but I'm hell-bent on killing the Fae Enchantress here, and so we will have our win. Elsewhere, you can see the Hawk Riders take off and rear charge somewhere else. And if we look at the Fae, she's not going to be long for this world, getting surrounded, routed completely. Over here, the sisters just running amok, trying to bounce back and forth between units, getting these peasant bowmen disrupted, preventing them from shooting. And we finally do take the Fan Enchantress, so she's going to lie here in her own blood amongst her brave, gallant knights who just couldn't hold up quite well enough. So now we are sort of rolling up this front line. Now my opponent certainly still has some troops left. He has a lot of pole arms. I personally didn't bring a lot of shooting, so the pole arms could still be relatively effective. And he still has a few bowmen, so it's definitely not the end of the world. But with the death of the Fan Enchantress, a lot of these damaged peasant units are suddenly going to start routing and not coming back because peasants don't have the best leadership. The defenders of the Fleur-de-Lis, actually, just because of that raw shock damage, completely shattered. Still having a respectable amount of models, 14, but they completely shattered. Over here, Grail Guardians are going to dive in, and now they're certainly a great unit at grind, but the situation here is such that I can just bog them down with the Lady, bog them down with the Eternal Guard, and then scoot and sort of wrap up the rest of this line. And we still have a rather healthy amount of troops, and of course with no more magic on the field to nuke my troops, my opponent's gonna have a rough time. You can see the Grail Guardians, yeah, they're holding, they'll do okay, but at the same time, you know, Eternal Guard, they're not pushovers, they're gonna drag them into the muck. Battle Pilgrims here completely shattering, giving up on the fight. We are actually gonna pull the Hawk Riders and our caster up into the sky. We're trying to pull our Wild Riders, keep them out of the fight here. We're gonna pull over to this flank, knock out these Knights Errant, knock out these Men-at-Arms, pull arms. Suddenly my opponent looking in a very green position. Of course, that Brettonian leadership, it just does not hold up. You can see the model count is still not favorable to him. He's lost about 700 troops, but so it's certainly not favorable. But at the same time, it's not like it's critically in my favor. But we are going to be able to start pushing through. You can see the Eternal Guard here going to move to bog down these spears. Our flying goon squad here just gunning for it, trying to get on top of these peasant bows. While here in the pits, you can see the Lady is just going to hold her ground and start slaying out with those Grail Guardians and doing a rather good job of it. Eternal Guard against these sort of more elite pole arms. Eternal Guard with shields, and I think I do want to cover this a little bit. Eternal Guard with shields will actually beat Men-at-Arms with pole arms in a straight-up fight, despite having shields. Like, honestly, Men-at-Arms with pole arms are a freaking terrible unit. There's no good way to put this. They're just a terrible unit. If there's one unit on the... Like, honestly, they serve very little purpose on the Brettonian roster. Sometimes I find them decent in matchups where you're going to be expecting a lot of armored large, just as an additional backup tool. But honestly, if there's one infantry unit, and Brettonia's infantry is by and large pretty good, but if there's one infantry of theirs that sucks, it is the Men-at-Arms with pole arm. I would basically never bring them. I'd recommend that here my opponent would have gotten much more value out of a unit of Grail Knights. But and they do get beaten down by Eternal Guard, who has shields, who is essentially better in literally every way that matters. Will beat them down. So in a straight up fight. So do keep that in mind. But quickly glossing over what happened there. The Eternal Guard, of course, performing rather well at holding, and in the late game, even though my opponent still had a lot of models, of course, he just didn't really have the leadership. Even the Grail Guardians, once I managed to mop up on the back line with my Wild Riders and with my Hawk Riders and those sorts of units, I would have then been able to sort of collapse on the Grail Guardians and mop them up in due time, because they're not going to chew through even Eternal Guard all that quick. Grail Guardians are not a killer unit. They're just a tank unit that if you buff them up a little bit, they'll do okay, but they're not really going to win much in melee, or in short-term melee, and it takes them a while to do anything. So the build here, I was actually kind of happy with it. It definitely worked out. My opponent perhaps was a little slow on micro. It definitely is micro-intensive, but at the same time, that's what you got to do with Brettonia as well. Both factions are relatively micro-intensive. The Eternal Guard did a great job just holding their own, just stalling these Men-at-Arms. The cost efficiency-wise, Eternal Guard is not better than Men-at-Arms in a straight-up infantry fight. As long as their leadership holds, of course. They've got much better leadership. But they were able to hold the line here. The Wild Riders did an immense job. You can see that the Wild Hunters Corner is getting completely mauled, but they managed to essentially tank through and slaughter 2 units of Knights Errant and the Fan Enchantress, draining them and getting hit by a Chalice of Potions. They managed to survive all of that, essentially. They managed to struggle through it and help the Hawk Rider mob win the fight with the Spellslinger and with the Lady. I definitely think it worked out rather well. Spellslinger of Life getting some great value on our Eagle. Just getting that meaty rear charge is so powerful. And definitely don't underestimate Hawk Riders. They're one of those, they're a unit that almost made the list for my top 10 hidden gems. But then I decided that people do sometimes use them. They're not that rare of a sight, and I'm like, okay, yeah, we're not going to include them here. But they're definitely a very solid unit and definitely very, very competitive. Definitely don't underestimate them. That AP damage on the charge, especially if you mob them. Now, certainly it might not be super cost effective, but you're going to get an ideal situation because you're going to get a rear charge. You're going to get a lot of AP on the charge, and you can just extricate yourself relatively easily. Hawk Riders are one of those units that can get in and out of a fight pretty well, I've found most of the time. Certainly better than Pegasus Knights, for example, in my experience. But yeah, the Sister of the Thorn did a valuable job just juking around the back line, being a nuisance. I was pretty happy all around. Just not happy with that Ember Spear at the beginning, which just got soaked up by peasants. Like meat shield at its finest, I guess. Not much else to say. For my opponent's build, like I said, I just don't agree with the pole arms. The rest of it, if you're going for an infantry mob, this is about as good as it's going to get. Don't get a little overexcited with the Enchantress, which is kind of what happened there for my opponent. He got a little overcommitted, looking to snipe out, I think, my Wild Heart Hunters, looking to take advantage of that opportunity there. And it kind of bit him in the rear, because instead he got rear charged and it completely wiped out. And that's the key with this. It's just so mobile. You've got every unit here in the air has over 100 speed, which is just amazing. But yeah, that's definitely my main critique here. If you're going for an infantry mob, drop the pole arms. They're not really worth it. Bring some Grail Knights. If your opponent brings Big Daddy Durthu or a Tree Man or Treekin, Grail Knights can cycle charge him to death. Your fire arrows could pulverize him over time. And you can completely pulp the rest of their army. So I wouldn't bother with the pole arms. But regardless, good game to my opponent, Wang Yuan here. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope you found it entertaining and fun. And if you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe below if you have not already. If you have any comments, any criticism, any questions, as usual, do not hesitate to ask or post down below, and I'll do my very best to respond as soon as I can. As usual, I do thank you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.